I spent a bit of time recently sort of thinking through why I do what I do. And I came to the conclusion that underlying it all, there's some sort of inherent belief that it's good for me. There's also this concept of mindfulness, which I like, and I've talked about a little bit on this channel. And then when I actually tried to think more deeply about it, I wasn't really sure if I could fully justify what I believe to be true. Now, recently I had a nice chat with a doctor of creativity. I'll link that video down below. And that gave me loads of thinking points, and loads of people got involved, commenting, asking questions and suggesting more topics to talk to, actual experts about. And this is one of those. So today we're going to be talking to Dr. Tamara Russell, who's written a couple of fantastic books about mindfulness and accessing mindful states in non-traditional ways. And she is an expert in mindfulness. I'm going to get changed into a different t-shirt, and magically, hi Tamara, thank you for joining us. Do you mind doing a little introduction?
So my name is Tamara Russell. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist and also a neuroscientist. And I have a love of martial arts, and that combination of all those things led me to be an expert in mindfulness in motion. I'm very interested in mindfulness and non-traditional ways of accessing mindful states and training in mindfulness.
Mindfulness seems to be around a lot at the moment, and I must say I'm interested in it in as much as I feel like it's a good thing, and I think I do it with my art. But is it everything it's cracked up to be?
I think mindfulness in the West has been sold a little bit as a panacea for all our ills. And, we've seen this migration, we say, from the monastery to the mainstream. And there are critics of that, accusing modern mindfulness of being this McMindfulness movement and stripping it away of its ethical, frameworks and all these sorts of controversies. But despite that, not only is it good if you want to sort of hone your skills, but it's showing from the research that it is also really helpful for people that are struggling with mental patterns that hold them back. It's actually not recommended to start doing mindfulness training in a crisis, because it's asking you to pay attention to what's arising in your internal environment. And if you suddenly turn inwards and go, oh, wow, what's all of that stuff? Oh my God, I've got a brain full of scary things. I've got a body full of intense experiences, right? So that's somewhere where it might be kind of really skillful to say, we've got something like creative practice, which we can use just, that kind of easing in.
So creativity is kind of like a soft way, perhaps, into mindfulness, or an easy way into mindfulness. Is that kind of what we might be saying?
Well, but it's soft and powerful, right? Because for some people, they say, that was brilliant, I don't need anything else, right? So I wouldn't minimize it just because it's the thing that comes first, but I think it's got some particular qualities about it that really make it helpful in a crisis.
Now, that's really interesting. So there's loads of potential benefits, not this like amazing panacea of instant fix, but lots of potential benefits. And creativity is a good way into it. And not just easy or soft, but actually generally potentially quite useful. Which I guess leads me to maybe this is my most important question. How do I know if I am being mindful? Or particularly, I feel like I am being mindful with my art, but am I?
That's a really great question. How do I know if I'm being mindful or if I am doing mindfulness? And you're not alone with that question, that's for sure. There's a whole variety of definitions of mindfulness. In the UK, we tend to work with what we call a standardized definition of mindfulness, and that's the one that comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn. So I'm going to say Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition, and you listen out for whether any of those things are happening for you when you're doing your creative practice. And maybe the listeners can do that as well. So Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as a type of awareness that arises when we are paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, and without judgment.
Now, I think I could fall down on a couple of these steps. One would be the intention or the purposefulness. Because often I am not being that purposeful in the sense of I just want my colours to do whatever they do, and I'll watch them and be happy, hopefully, at the end. So what do we mean by that intention or that kind of purposeful bit of mindfulness?
Great question. Where do we place the intention? Could have an intention to create, in which case you let things unfold, but you might have an intention to create a particular color or a particular shape or a particular image, in which case you're narrowing down the intentions a bit more. So there's levels and layers of intentionality and purpose in this.
Now, it feels to me like the bit I would definitely fall down on sometimes is the judging bit. And I know that's kind of a focus for a lot of people who come to my workshops and people who watch me here on YouTube as well, is the kind of release from that judgment. Is that vital, I guess, or is that the hardest bit to get on top of?
Yeah, the non-judging aspect of mindfulness seems to be quite critical. So in the Buddhist teachings, I'm not a Buddhist, but I dove into this and had conversations and been on retreats to understand a bit more about how they do it. But they say that mindfulness and compassion are the two wings of the same bird. And you train both. So one is about increasing the quality of presence and attention and non-reactivity. And the other is then that cultivation of loving kindness, compassion. So in the research on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which we use here in the UK for the treatment of recurrent depression, it actually turns out that changes in self-compassion are underpinning the changes in mindfulness, which are related to the reduction of the depression symptoms. And if we imagine that we will immediately start to recognize how much our mind wanders when we start to try to focus deliberately. And it's in that moment of mind wandering where we need to say, I love you, my darling brain. Thank you for bringing that to my attention now. But right now, I would like to just be on the breath. We can have the same thing when you're doing the creative practice. In fact, the creative practice really invites the non-judging. I mean, it activates judging, but then it also invites non-judging. Particularly if we're thinking about depression, judging and comparison, mental monkeys are the two things that if those get out of control, we will definitely end up depressed.
So that's really useful. And it's getting quite complex at the same time, isn't it? We've got various bits of the definition to think about. We've got compassion to think about and that kind of being nice to ourselves. Now, I know that you've written a book and I know you have a model for mindfulness or a step-by-step model. And I love a step-by-step thing. Can you tell me more about that? Because I guess what I would love to know is how I can be more mindful or the process by which I can benefit myself a bit more in this.
So a real cornerstone of how I teach mindfulness is this 4-stage neurocognitive model. So it's 4 cognitive stages, 3 brain networks, 2 secret ingredients. And I talk about it in my book, #WhatIsMindfulness. So it's this, we call it the 4-stage neurocognitive model.
And I did spot in there a very nice little flowchart, which is always a good book.
Yeah, and it's kind of linked to the it's linked to some of the Kabat-Zinn definition, paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, without judgment. But I also draw upon some research from neuroimaging, which tells us that there are sort of 4 cognitive stages involved in a mindful moment: focusing, getting lost, mind wandering, noticing, and coming back.
That's brilliant. So there is a nice model, and I guess there was 4 little bits to the definition you gave as well. So I'm spotting a potential link.
So sort of level 1 is maybe I'm feeling stressed out. I want to get my sketch pad out and my paints or my pencil. or my coloring book, and I'm just using the art or the creative process to distract myself, which already is like beautiful self-care, may encourage this moment of mindfulness because the task is pulling your attention and the task is kind of coloring. Maybe it's a nice repetition. Attentional focus is perhaps pulled away from ruminations and stressing about stuff, and you're creating and a flower is coming and the colors look beautiful.
So step one is kind of just the very act of paying attention, and like just being kind of in that moment, I guess. And
so paying attention. Yeah, we're paying attention. I mean, I sometimes work with the coloring in books, and the coloring in books are great because they give you some guidelines where you have to focus and you have to pay attention. Pay attention if you are doing still life, right? You need to observe. You need to look at the oranges and the apples and the jug. I have to go back to my school days now. You need to observe and be present and observe the colors, how they're mixing, how they're blending. But you could also pull right back and just be like, I'm just allowing color to be there, right? So there's variations on that focus.
Now I'm going to go fully self-involved here, but if like a colouring book, so following something is potentially quite mindful or giving you that attention, might following a YouTube tutorial be mindful?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, you're following, you're focused, there's something capturing your attention, and you're needing to kind of keep going with it and persist with it.
Now this is a little bit of a tangent, but something I think is true, and I don't know why I think this is true, but I think it's true, is you can only focus on one thing at once. So when I'm teaching people, especially in person, I really give that focus on, we're doing this, we're trying to do the proportions in the scene, and everything else might go terribly wrong. Particularly the idea of like being loose often gets lost if we're focusing on one thing. But I don't know if I've just invented that. And it feels like with all this idea of attention, we keep talking about attending one thing. So am I right in my little assumption?
That point about can we only focus at one thing on a time? I mean, the myth of multitasking was something that really has come out in the last few decades, I suppose. It used to be that, multitasking was the thing, and, oh, I'm a good multitasker. You put that on your CV. Understand from the neurosciences that it isn't possible to focus on multiple things at one time with high quality focused attention. And when you're doing multiple tasks, you're likely switching, very rapid switching. That may not be the case for all minds and brains. Some people with ADHD do report that they are able to kind of have open multiple tracks. They're probably not fully focused on all of them. And that's a little bit how I work with mindfulness. I train all the different separate bits. Let's train and understand about intention. Now let's train and understand about attention. Now let's train and understand what is that monitoring, right? And you're doing something similar, like the perspective, the colors, the tones, the mixing, whatever. I'm not an artist, I don't know. But all together, they make the creative tools, I suppose.
So I keep diverting us, taking us on silly tangents. Hopefully they're interesting. They're interesting to me. We got step one then, attention. What is like step two or level two?
I guess level two might be, as you're doing that, perhaps becoming alert to the moments when you lose focus. So I kind of say like to people, am I here or am I there? Just beginning to notice, am I here or am I there? And, if you are coloring or drawing, you may get pulled away by what I would call task-related mind wandering, like, oh, does this look okay? Or mine doesn't look like his, or, oh, this pencil's not sharp enough, or, oops, I've colored onto my desk, So mind wandering related to the task that you're doing, or it could be just, random mind wandering, memories, planning, conversation, stuff that's not really related. So then you might say, oh, am I here or am I there? And if I've gone over there, I want to get back to here.
Interesting. So we got attention, and then we just got like noticing that when we're not attending. Something which comes to my mind listening to that is that I guess we can't always be being mindful making art. The reason I say that is, let's say someone wants us to do a commission of their dog. We do need to be both really focusing on what's happening, but we need to be able to step back and think about lots of different things and judge it as well, I guess, which is taking it a step further. But it feels like art is probably a balance, being mindful, but also being able to step out of that mode.
So there's that bit, which is like, we may want to be aware of the thoughts. Those thoughts may have important information. We want to be mindful of the cognitive stream, which is different than being present with the drawing. But what you're saying also, I think there's another version of that, which is, artists or people who want to create art who say, I surrender. And I would say they are in presence, but they're more likely to be in those kind of flow states, which are distinct from the monitoring of the mindful mode.
Sheesh, feels like I'm learning everything today. So we have now got step 1, attention. Step 2, losing attention, but recognizing it. Step 3?
Yeah, so step 3 for me would be, again, just building on that, which is focusing, getting lost, noticing, and in the noticing, applying all the compassion. And somebody once said to me, but I can just get back. I don't need to put all that compassion in there. Like, I just drop that thought and I just get back to drawing. So like, why do I need to do that? And I said, you need to do that because I would like you to practice, no matter what arises in your mind, the ability to say, mind, I love you. Mind, and I want your brain to learn, wonder, noticing, I love you. So that later on, if you're dealing with more tricky thoughts, more painful thoughts, more punishing thoughts, your brain knows how to do that 1, 2, 3 sequence. Oh, there's a thought. I think I'm stupid. There's a thought. Oh gosh, I got that wrong. I'm so dumb. What's wrong with me? Oh, that's just a thought. Oh, thoughts, I love you. Kabat-Zinn calls it sowing your parachute before you need it.
Now that is a very powerful analogy, which gives me a lot more understanding about the purpose of like practicing mindfulness. I would like my parachute to work. So I guess I'd like my mindfulness to work. What then is the clincher? How do we've got our 3 steps. What's our 4th step?
Step 4 is kind of bringing it all together, really, which is focusing with intention, mind wandering, going, oh, there's my mind wandering, and then coming back. Yep. So there's this second part of the neural architecture that needs exercising, which is the releasing. Then you go back to your intentions and you say, what was I doing? Oh, yeah, I was focusing on the thing. Hello, attention network. Come on. Back to here. Okay. So your brain networks are kind of, they're interacting with each other. Yeah, your focused attention network is on the task, and then the mind wanders and the attention disengages. The default mode network comes online. We're lost for a little bit in the default mode network, and then we've got that moment. Salience network activates and says, Tamara, you were supposed to be coloring in, and what you're doing is you're thinking about all these thoughts now. Like, what do you want to do? And I'm using that voice deliberately because in the early stages for me, it was like, Tamara, you're so stupid. You can't even pay attention to this stupid exercise that you're doing. You've been mind wandering with this nonsense, with this fight you had with your partner, like for the last 30 minutes, like get a grip. But now I've learned to say, Tamara's brain, what's up with you? Come on, let's go. I love you, you're amazing. But let's check. What was the plan? Oh, the plan was to stay focused. Re-engage the attention network.
Now, my focus on the reason I like mindfulness and creativity is I have this assumption, and I think it's probably true from talking, that it's good for us. But is there other ways that we can be sort of benefiting ourselves mentally from being creative, even if we're not being mindful?
There are many people using creative practice that don't know anything about mindfulness. I mean, I think the takeaway I would give to your audience is, getting your sketch pad out, taking care of yourself, honoring and nurturing your creative spirit is already an act of self-care. Is it training your brain to make you more resilient to the internal tsunamis that may hit you now and again? Depends on how you're doing it, right? Depends on how you're doing it. But the very act of saying, I honor my creative soul, I'm giving myself permission to create, that's already an act of self-care. How you're using the creative practice is also important. So are you using the creative practice to help you make sense of an experience? Maybe it's a collage. Maybe you're trying to do like a timeline. Maybe you're doing some creative practice around a situation that you're trying to resolve. Then you're sort of into the art therapy kind of landscape, but you don't need to be an art therapist. And it's not always about interpreting what you've done. It's about saying, I would love my right hemisphere to be involved in helping me to understand what's going on.
Right, I've got to say, this has been an absolutely fascinating chat. There's a key thing though, there's a really key question, which is, where can people find your books? Before you go, where can people find your books and more about you as well?
So hashtag What is Mindfulness and Mindfulness in Motion are available on Amazon. I'm also going to be in October at the Manchester Mindfulness Festival, for those that might be up in the north of England, where I'm going to be speaking about ADHD and mindfulness and how using this model is particularly helpful. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Tamara Russell. I'm also on TikTok, LinkedIn. You can find me, you can get in touch with me. And happy to meet you and answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much for that. Really, really interesting. And I've learned absolutely loads.
What have you learned? Standout thing that you think, oh, I didn't realize that.
I walked into that one, didn't I? What have I learned? I think that analogy, sewing your parachute before you need it, that is the biggest take home for me. So the idea of practicing attention, coming back, being nice to myself about it, and sort of then getting back in that moment, and practicing that even when I don't need to, so that when I do need to, it still happens. That is super powerful for me. So that is my biggest take home. I guess what I'd say as well is, down below, I'm sure there'll be loads of take homes from other people. In a comment, just tell me what was your biggest take home, and tell Tamara what was her biggest take home as well. From me, it's been great having this interesting chat. I hope you found it really useful as well. Thanks again to Tamara for giving up her time. And I will see you in the next one.